Hi, and welcome back to All Politics is Local. As we discussed, we're going to be reviewing the select board candidates that are running for re-election. A familiar face we're going to start off with tonight, Yolanda Greaves. Yolanda is running for re-election to the select board. Welcome, Yolanda. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, John, for having me. It's always a pleasure to get to talk to you and then in turn talk to your viewers.
Well, I think it's great that you're stepping up again. You're going to run for re-election. You've been a long-time elected official in Ashland. I remember meeting you when you were back on the school committee. And here you are now running for, what's this going to be your term if you're re-elected? What's this going to be your term on the select board?
This will be my fourth term on the select board. And as you mentioned, I spent 5 years on the school committee. I completed a term vacated by Karen Spilka, which was for 2 years, and then I did another 3 years.
So at least 15 years of service to the town of Ashland in an elected position. I mean, that's quite commendable.
As an elected official, there's been a lot of other things along the way,
Sure.
As most people do.
So coming out of a pandemic, you still have the energy and the passion to run for a re-election. Tell the voters why you're running for re-election.
Well, I think for myself, the main reason I'm running is I think things are moving forward right now in Ashland. There's a lot of great projects that we are working on that the public has supported that I'd like to help continue and make sure they get completed. I think one of the big ones that right now is a bit controversial is the Route 126 project. It is something I've been 9 years on the select board, and I've been working on this to get it to fruition for about 8 years. And lots of meetings here in town, lots of meetings in Boston, making sure we got the financing from the federal government and the state to begin with, and then keeping ourselves in that position to be able to get the funding. And again, it's right now we are in the midst of it, and it's hard on the people who live right there. And what I say is, I it's hard to be sacrificing, but know that once this project is done, it is just going to be a great corridor for everyone in Ashland.
So you are getting some feedback because of the construction and people not being aware of what's going on, or what is some of the feedback you're getting?
Well, as with many projects that happen, not only the Route 126 project, but other projects that they get voted on and they get decided on, but because of either funding or timing or because of who's doing it, it doesn't happen right away. And so it's not in the forefront of people's minds. And for people who are newer to Ashland, they weren't there for the discussion. They weren't there for the debates and the bike lanes and the looking at what it's going to look like. So that's the hard part. But I still enjoy what I do on the select board, and I try to and work to listen and be the voice for residents. They can always reach out, and I've had many people, during the years reach out and have positive and negative discussion about what's going on. And I guess it comes down to I'm still enjoying what I'm doing, and I'm hoping that the residents I'm hoping that the residents like what I have done in the past 9 years.
So what do you identify as some of the big issues coming out of a pandemic? What are some of the issues that are plaguing the town that most people maybe don't know that aren't in town hall every day?
Well, I think some of the big things that we're dealing with is the financial review and the financial impact that it has had to town hall as well as to our residents. And we had to make budget cuts because incomes were less and the finances were not great. I think we're coming out of it pretty strongly thanks to financial policies that we've been able to put in place many years ago that gave us reserves that when we did our budget last year as the pandemic hit, we were able to pull from those reserves to make sure that we did not have to cut services, and working with our school department, making sure that what they needed to do to be able to educate our students and offer the flexibility of the hybrid model that was done at the schools because of our financial stability and those policies that we put in place many years ago, we were able to do that. And as we come out of the pandemic, still making sure we can do that. And then I think the other one, but this is very visible, is supporting our restaurants and supporting our small businesses here in town. We have a great economic development director that we brought on a number of years ago, and she is working with our small businesses. She is working with our restaurants, seeing what they need. She works tirelessly to bring in grants that the state is offering for some street issues, for fundings for restaurants, for all these other great programs that as a town we can support because of the work that's being done through town hall and the select board and board of health and everyone else who's involved.
Now, have there been any preliminary numbers, and keep in mind they're preliminary, but I would imagine from the governor, from the federal government stimulus programs, have you seen any of those numbers yet, or is it all still being vetted through the system?
We've heard a number of probably about, sorry to cut you off, of probably about $5 million. And that sounds great, but as we know, as money comes from the federal government, there are always restrictions and guidelines as to how those can be used. And because the funding will only be there for possibly 2 years through the current CARES Act, we have to look at how we use them to make sure they're for one-time costs for reinvestment into our community and not necessarily expenses that once that funding goes away, we would then have to have funding to match that. So we're looking at infrastructure and I know internet and there's a couple of other things, but part of it is we're still waiting for some of the guidelines from the federal government and then from the state as to how exactly we can use them. I know there'll be some for our schools, which they've already gotten a fair amount of funding from the CARES Act to be able to do the extra space and the extra moving of equipment, putting it out in pods, now bringing it back in, hiring some teachers with those CARES Act for temporary use as they were doing both the hybrid model and then the remote learning that certain families chose.
So there's some exciting things going on in town. As you started off, you said the construction projects on 126. Kudos to the select board as well. Also, you finally got the public safety building and done under construction. And I had some experience with that and thought it was never coming. So why don't you brag about that for a minute or two?
Sure. I think as long as I've been a member on the select board or as long as I've been involved in things in town, there's always been the discussion that we need a new public safety building. As many people know, when the police station was originally built in the early 1970s, it was outdated within a year or two of it being built, partly because of the lack of facilities for female officers. Our downtown fire station is a fabulous old building, but when it was built, the fire trucks that were going in there were horse and wagon. We have the building on Cedar Street, but as we know, that has been retrofitted so many times because it wasn't built as a fire station. So, and I think the kudos go to the residents of Ashland for continuing to push for this and then for turning around and working with us and our public safety committee to get it voted on and get it passed at town meeting and at the ballot. As with anything, we can decide or we can look at how we need things, but we have to work with the residents to make these things happen. And for the public safety building and for the Mendez project, that happened. We got the support. The people realized that it might be an increase in taxes, but the benefit to our community for both of these projects. And I know one of the things that happened was people were saying, well, why did both projects come forward and why during a pandemic? And the pandemic wasn't planned. And these two building projects had been moving forward for a number of years before, we hit this lockdown last March. So I applaud the residents who supported it and came out, but I also applaud our staff for making it comfortable and safe for people to come out and support both of these projects.
Well, we're speaking with Yolanda Greaves. Yolanda is running for re-election to the select board. Yolanda, we never have enough time here on All Politics is Local. You've got 1 minute to make your pitch to why people should re-elect you to the select board.
Well, 1 minute is, let's see. So I always think about that I am not a politician, even though people say that. I am a public servant. And I've always looked at as a select board member as a privilege. And that when I make decisions or what I do it with the voice of the people in my head. And I'm not always going to agree, and not everyone is going to agree with my decisions. And I understand that. But even with some of the projects we just talked about, there are always going to be people who either don't support it or don't think it's the right time. And I understand that, but my hope is that enough people feel that the work I've done the last 9 years and that I'm hoping to continue to do will allow them to support me as they head to the ballot box. And I know that some people have already voted as this is airing because we were able to continue with mail-in voting. There will be early voting as well. So we can't just say, I hope you vote for me on May 18th. But as you head to the ballot box or whenever you vote, I hope I have gained your support based on the experience that I've shown over the last 9 years.
I'm John
Thank you.
Fetherston. We'll talk again.
That's
real soon.
Yolanda Greaves. She's running for re-election to the select board here in Ashland. She'll be on the ballot. Thanks, Yolanda, for joining us here on All Politics is Local.